Okay, if you're not bored enough, this is the History of America Part 2 up to the end of the American Revolution. And where we left off was with William Penn founding the colony of Pennsylvania. And that was a pretty important thing. I told you about all the colonies that were founded between 1628, when the Massachusetts Bay Colony was founded, in 1681, when Pennsylvania was founded. Yada, yada, yada. Who cares? What's really important, though, is this big event. In May of 1754. Okay, so we skipped forward like 50 years, or more than that, 70 years. So a bunch of stuff happened during that time period. I mean, stuff like George Washington was born, Ben Franklin was born, a bunch of people got rich, the Indians got massacred and their land was stolen, all that usual stuff of American history. But what's really important now is this event. In May of 1754, at a place with a really funny name called Jumonville Glen. I'll spell it for you because it's kind of odd. At this place, one of the most important events, certainly in the history of America, but really probably in the history of the world, happened. We come to Jumonville Glen because you will remember Virginia had plantations that grew tobacco and other cash crops like cotton. These cash crops made people very rich, but they could only become rich if they got more and more land to use to grow more and more of these crops to sell to Europeans. They wanted land, and the land they wanted was in the Ohio River Valley. But the problem was the Ohio River Valley was claimed by the French. Uh-oh, big problem. So what happens? Well, the most powerful man in the colony of Virginia at the time was the governor. The governor gets an officer that he kind of likes and thinks might be able to do this job, whose name happened to be George Washington. And he sends him to go tell the French to get out. Needless to say, the French were not happy about this message, and they told George Washington to go home and, tell his boss, nope, we're not giving up, this is our land. Well, during this trip that he took from Virginia up to the area which is now around the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he encountered a group of French soldiers. And he and the Indian companions he had with him, really it was mostly the Indian companions who hated the French for various reasons, they massacred the French, every single person. And unfortunately, one of the people was a diplomat who was the brother of the governor of New France. Yeah, that's not a good plan. So as a result of that unfortunate accident, George Washington actually was almost single-handedly responsible for the start of the French and Indian War. Now you remember how important I said this war was in the history of America, the French and Indian War. Now, you remember, it's not that the French were fighting with the Indians, but the French and the Indians were fighting versus the English. And remember, everyone in America at that time who was not French or Spanish was English. And we're talking about the French fighting, French and their Indian allies fighting the people in the English colonies. Now, the French and Indian War is also known as the 7 Years' War. You'll hear that referred to. And you have to keep in mind that it was part of a much larger war that England and France had been waging for years in other parts of the world. But the 7 Years' War became the central focus of the war between France and England, and it led to an expansion of the war throughout the world as far away as India and the South Pacific. Anyway, very, very important event, this French and Indian War. Now, at first, you remember I told you the British were losing. They were a bunch of losers. They lost lots of battles, and the reason was because they had poor tactics. They were running around in the woods with wool coats in the middle of summer with mosquitoes, thick, dense forest. They were trying to bring cannons and carriages and all kinds of junk with them, whereas the French, oh yeah, let me not forget, they were wearing those bright red coats and had those shiny hats on their heads, which made perfect targets for the French and the Indians, who were shooting from cover behind trees in bushes. They would come and attack and then run away, and the British were destroyed. Now, really important to remember, George Washington was there. He fought alongside the British Army. In fact, he was the assistant, the highest ranking colonial assistant to the British general in charge of the British Army at the beginning of the French and Indian War, and he saw the tactics that the British used. He knew how to defeat the British, and this becomes really important later when, guess what, George Washington fights the British in the American Revolution, but that was a little spoiler. Okay, so yeah, okay, sorry about the dog bark attack. Anyway, the 7 Years' War all changed for the British when a British aristocrat named William Pitt changed the strategies and changed people's attitudes about the war. He convinced the British people that the war was an important war to be won. He got money for the war. He got more soldiers. He got all kinds of stuff going on. And as a result, the British started winning the war. And ultimately, after some major battles, the biggest and most famous being the Battle of the Battle of Quebec City, where James Wolfe, the British commander, took the city of Quebec, which was the capital of New France, all of the French holdings in North America. He, after that battle, it was downhill for the French all the way, and in 1763, we have an end to the war with the Treaty of Paris. Now, this is not the last time you're going to see Treaty of Paris, because this is the first Treaty of Paris. There will be another one. Okay, so remember, the war was fought for all that land that was to the west of the Appalachian Mountains, which is the mountain chain that runs down the east coast of the United States. All of these people fought this war with the French in order to be able to go and settle that land. Oddly enough, in 1763, the King of England does something which sets the stage for the American Revolution. He issues the Royal Proclamation. Royal Proclamation. Oh, I'm running out of... I'll just call it the Royal Proc. The Royal Proclamation of 1763, in which he said, no one except Native Americans, Indians, could settle to the west of the Appalachians. Wait a minute. There's something wrong here. We just fought this big war so that we could go and settle over there on the other side of the mountains and build big plantations and get really filthy rich. And now you, king, are telling us we cannot settle there? That's not right. But that's not where it ended. Things got even less right in the next several years. And I'm run out of time, so I gotta stop now, and we'll go to part 3 next.